Hello and welcome to another episode, or as we like to call it in the biz, another nail in the coffin of our collective sanity. In this episode, we're diving headfirst into a topic that's about as fun as a colonoscopy performed by a rabid badger mass deportations. Because apparently in 2024, several countries around the world decided that the best way to solve their problems is to just yeet people out. So buckle up as we take a trip around the world, exploring the top 10 countries that seem to have mistaken deportation for a national pastime. America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, and apparently the world champion of you can't sit with us when it comes to immigration. Following the recent election, because when has America ever had a dull election? The newly minted President-elect Donald Trump has decided to bring back his greatest hit mass deportations. The target? Undocumented immigrants who are apparently single-handedly responsible for everything from bad traffic to lukewarm coffee. The plan? Round them up, ship them out, and hopefully no one will ask too many questions about due process or basic human decency. Now we're talking about potentially millions of people here, folks. Millions. That's like more people than there are Starbucks in the world. Probably. And to accomplish this Herculean feat of human Tetris, the government is planning to involve everyone but your Aunt Mildred and her Chihuahua. We're talking the military, local law enforcement, that guy who mows your lawn. Everyone's invited to this deportation party. Naturally, this has sparked a bit of a debate. Some folks are all for it, citing things like national security and jobs. Others are deeply concerned about the potential social and economic fallout, which, let's be honest, is about as predictable as a toddler with a juice box. Next up, we hop on over to the Dominican Republic, where the government seems to be playing a real-life game of how many Haitians can we deport before lunch. See, there's been a recent surge of Haitian refugees fleeing gang violence because apparently living in a constant state of terror isn't exactly a selling point for a country. But instead of, addressing the humanitarian crisis at hand, the Dominican government decided the best course of action was to implement an immigration enforcement plan so extensive it makes airport security look like a game of Red Rover. Their goal? To deport a cool 10,000 Haitians per week. That's like the entire population of a small town. Except instead of gossiping about Mrs. Miggins's prize-winning zucchini, they're being forcibly removed from their homes. And just to put a fine point on it, we're talking about nearly 5% of the Dominican Republic's population here. That's a lot of people to pack into buses and boats. Unsurprisingly, human rights organizations are about as thrilled as a vegan at a sausage fest. And even industries that rely on Haitian labor are starting to sweat a little. But hey, who needs basic human rights and a stable economy when you can have... Well, that's a good question, isn't it? And now, for a country known for its romantic language and even more romantic immigration policies, France has decided to, spice things up in 2024. That's right, France, the land of baguettes and berets, has decided to crack down on immigration. Because nothing says welcome to France like a side of deportation with your croissant. French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau, a man whose name sounds like a rejected cheese course, has announced new initiatives to limit residence permits and narrow the criteria for regularization of undocumented individuals. They're basically making it harder to legally exist in France, which, let's be honest, is a pretty impressive feat. The government is emphasizing language proficiency and integration into French culture as requirements for staying in the country. Now you might be thinking, John, this all seems a bit harsh. Doesn't France have a long history of welcoming immigrants? And to that I say, oui, but things change. France, like many other countries, is grappling with economic anxieties and concerns about national identity. And as we've seen time and time again, when those anxieties flare up, immigrants often become the scapegoat. But here's the thing, blaming immigrants for complex societal problems is like blaming your cat for climate change. Sure, they might knock over a recycling bin or two, but they're not the root of the issue. So, while France might be trying to control its borders, it's important to remember that real solutions require nuance, compassion, and a hell of a lot more than just making people pass a baguette dunking exam. Next, we turn our attention to Turkey, a country that finds itself in a geopolitical pressure cooker. Situated at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, Turkey has become a major destination for refugees, particularly from war-torn Syria. Now, it's important to acknowledge that Turkey has shown remarkable generosity in hosting millions of refugees over the years. But as with any complex situation, the strain is starting to show. The Turkish government, facing mounting pressure on resources and public services, has been stepping up deportations. They argue that it's necessary to maintain national security and manage the sheer number of arrivals. However, human rights groups have raised concerns about the treatment of deportees and the potential for people to be sent back to dangerous situations. It's a delicate balancing act, and one that Turkey is struggling to maintain. Imagine fleeing your home country because of war, persecution, or unimaginable hardship. You risk everything to seek safety and a better life for yourself and your family. You finally reach a country that seems welcoming, only to find yourself facing the threat of deportation. That, my friends, is the reality for many refugees in Turkey today. The Turkish government's policy of mass deportations raises serious ethical questions about a country's responsibility to protect those seeking asylum. It also highlights the human cost of geopolitical conflicts that often force innocent people to flee their homes. The situation in Turkey is a stark reminder that behind the statistics and policy debates are real people with real lives, hopes, and dreams, and those stories deserve to be heard. And now, let's set sail for Italy, a country known for its delicious, pasta-stunning architecture and apparently a newfound fondness for closed borders. You see, Italy has become a major entry point for migrants crossing the Mediterranean Sea, often in overcrowded and dangerous boats. And while rescuing people from drowning should be a basic human instinct, some Italian politicians seem to have missed that memo. The Italian government, fueled by a wave of anti-immigration sentiment, has decided to tackle the issue with the grace and subtlety of a runaway gondola. They've implemented stricter border controls, increased deportations, and made it significantly harder for migrants to seek asylum. It's almost as if they looked at the legacy of the Roman Empire, known for its cultural exchange and integration, and said, "Nah, let's not do that again." Now, I understand that Italy is facing real challenges. Managing a large influx of migrants is no easy feat. But resorting to harsh and often inhumane policies is not the answer. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet by blowing up the entire plumbing system. It's messy, ineffective, and leaves everyone worse off. Instead of treating migrants with dignity and compassion, the Italian government is treating them like problems to be solved, or worse, inconveniences to be ignored. And that's not just morally wrong, it's also incredibly short-sighted. Because here's the thing. Italy, like many other countries facing demographic decline, needs immigrants. They contribute to the economy, enrich the culture, and bring new ideas and perspectives. But hey, who needs diversity and a vibrant society when you can have xenophobia and a shrinking population, right? Right, Australia, the land of venomous everything and surprisingly strict immigration policies. You might think a country with literally drop bears, mate as a legitimate safety warning, would be chill about who comes in. But no, in 2024, they've decided to double down on deportations. See, Australia loves a good rule, and they really love enforcing them. Overstayed your visa by a day? Enjoy that flight back, mate, and try not to get bitten by a funnel web spider on the way out. The focus is on enforcing existing policies, which is government speak for we're cracking down because we can. It's all about maintaining those tight borders. Now, the Australian government will tell you this is all about making sure everyone plays by the rules. And sure, rules are important, but this feels a bit like getting detention for chewing gum when the kid next to you brought a chainsaw to school. They're targeting people who've overstayed visas, or God forbid, misunderstood the incredibly complex web of immigration regulations. It's enough to make you wish you were being deported just to escape the paperwork. And let's not forget, Australia has a bit of a history with this whole kicking people out thing, don't they? The whole White Australia policy wasn't exactly their finest moment, so yeah, maybe they should focus on, I don't know, not repeating the mistakes of the past before they go full border patrol on everyone. Ah, Saudi Arabia, land of vast deserts, unimaginable wealth, and mass deportations? Yep, turns out even a country swimming in oil money has its limits on who it wants hanging around. Now you might think a country with more money than it knows what to do with could afford to be a little more welcoming, but you'd be wrong. See, in Saudi Arabia, it's not just about who has money, it's about whose. They've ramped up efforts to enforce employment and residency regulations as part of their Saudization policy. And no, that's not a word I made up, though I wish it was. Basically, it means prioritizing jobs for Saudi nationals, which on the surface sounds fair enough, right? Except when you realize it involves booting out thousands of migrant workers who helped build the very country they're now being kicked out of. These deportations primarily target workers from neighboring countries, many of whom have been living and working in Saudi Arabia for years. They've contributed to the economy, built infrastructure, and frankly, done a lot of the jobs that many Saudis don't want to do. But now they're being told, thanks for your service, now get out. It's like inviting someone over for dinner, making them do all the dishes and then kicking them out before dessert. The Saudi government argues that this is all about creating jobs for its own citizens. And while that's a noble goal, it's hard not to see this as a blatant case of out with the old, in with the, well, still pretty much just us. It's a policy that reeks of hypocrisy and smacks of exploitation. But hey, at least they have plenty of oil money to, I don't know, build a bigger deportation center, right? Ah, the United Kingdom, land of tea, crumpets, and increasingly strict immigration policies. Remember Brexit? That whole we're leaving the EU thing? Well, turns out it wasn't just about confusing trade deals and blue passports. It also paved the way for, you guessed it, more deportations. Because what better way to celebrate your newfound independence than by kicking people out, right? Makes perfect sense. Post-Brexit immigration rules have led to stricter deportation policies, particularly for those pesky non-European folks who had the audacity to, not be born in the right place at the right time. The UK government claims it's about tightening border controls, but it feels a lot like slamming the door shut after the horse has bolted, eaten all your biscuits, and left a rather impolite deposit on your carpet. These new policies specifically target individuals from non-European countries who don't meet the ever-shifting sands of visa and residency requirements. It's like trying to win a game where the rules change every 5 minutes and are written in a language you don't understand. And don't even get me started on the sheer bureaucratic nightmare of trying to navigate the UK's immigration system. It's enough to make Kafka say, mate, that's a bit much, even for me. The UK government argues that it's all about managing immigration levels carefully. But when you're targeting people who've built lives, families, and careers in your country, it feels less like careful management and More like selective amnesia about who actually built those curry houses you like so much. Right, Malaysia. You know, that lovely country known for its beaches, rainforests, and apparently a deep-seated aversion to undocumented migrant workers. Primarily from Bangladesh and Indonesia, these workers often find themselves in Malaysia's crosshairs. Now, you might think, come on, John, every country has a right to control its borders. And you wouldn't be entirely wrong. But Malaysia's approach is less controlled border and more borderline panic. They're rounding up undocumented workers like they're playing a real-life game of Pokemon Go, except instead of catching adorable monsters, they're catching human beings and shipping them back where they came from. The Malaysian government argues that it's all about controlling the informal labor market and reducing illegal migration. And while those sound like legitimate concerns on paper, the reality is far more complicated. These workers often fill essential roles in Malaysia's economy, doing the jobs many Malaysians won't do. But hey, who needs nuance when you can just scapegoat vulnerable populations, right? What gets lost in all this talk about labor markets and illegal migration is the human cost. These mass deportations tear families apart, leaving children without parents and loved ones separated by borders and bureaucracy. Imagine being ripped away from your family, your job, your life, and sent back to a place you may not have called home for years. Imagine the fear, the uncertainty, the sheer desperation of it all. It's a reality that countless migrant workers in Malaysia face every single day. And for what? To create the illusion of control? To appease a public whipped into a frenzy by anti-immigrant rhetoric? It's a cynical, short-sighted approach that does far more harm than good. But hey, at least the Malaysian government can sleep soundly at night knowing that their informal labor market is safe from those pesky undocumented workers. Because apparently, economic stability is more important than human dignity. Ah, Greece. Land of ancient ruins, stunning beaches, and apparently a government determined to turn the country into a giant deportation center. You see, Greece has long been a gateway for migrants entering the European Union, a sunny stopover on their journey to a better life. But lately, the welcome mat has been replaced with a rather large, rather intimidating bouncer named increased deportations. Greece is feeling the strain of being the EU's unofficial welcome wagon, with overcrowded refugee camps and local communities struggling to cope with the influx of people. So, what's the solution, you ask? Well, if you're the Greek government, it's to ramp up deportations, sending people back to the very countries they risked their lives to escape. It's like offering someone a glass of water after they've crawled through the desert, only to then dump it out on their head and tell them to walk back. The government claims it's about managing overcrowding and alleviating strain on local communities. And while those are valid concerns, deporting vulnerable people back to dangerous situations is not the answer. It's a band-aid solution to a much deeper problem. A problem that requires compassion, cooperation, and a hell of a lot more than just sending people back to square one. The situation in Greece is a stark reminder of the human cost of the global migration crisis. These are people, not numbers, fleeing war, persecution, and unimaginable hardship. They arrive on Europe's shores exhausted, traumatized, and desperate for safety and security. But instead of finding compassion and support, they're met with suspicion, hostility, and the ever-present threat of deportation. It's enough to make you wonder if the ancient Greeks, known for their hospitality and philosophy, would even recognize their country today. The Greek government's response, like that of many European nations, is a moral failure of epic proportions. It's a betrayal of the values of humanity, solidarity, and basic human decency. And while the politicians pat themselves on the back for taking a tough stance on immigration, it's the vulnerable, the desperate, and the dispossessed who are left to pay the price. It's a shameful situation, folks, and it's not getting any better. Well, there you have it. The top 10 countries making mass deportation their go-to party trick in 2024. From the United States to Greece, it seems like everyone's got deportation fever, and frankly, it's about as fun as it sounds. These policies, while often dressed up in the language of national security and economic stability, have devastating consequences for the lives of millions. They tear families apart, fuel xenophobia, and erode the very fabric of our shared humanity. If this whirlwind tour of global deportation hotspots has left you feeling even a fraction as angry and heartbroken as it's left me, then good. Hold on to that feeling. Channel it into action. Support organizations fighting for immigrant rights. Call out injustice wherever you see it. And never, ever stop questioning those in power. Because in a world increasingly defined by walls and borders, it's our shared humanity that will ultimately set us free. Thanks for watching.